to the Homestead Skill of the Month Club. We're in month 3, which is garden soil and seeds. This is a Tuesday chat, which is one of our conversations. And today we're going to kind of stretch the subject of garden soil and seeds to also include homesteading. What is homesteading and some strategies for homesteading. And we're going to talk more about what that is, so I don't have to do a sudden recap. We've brought our friend Thomas to talk. And also because, although Thomas and I love to talk to each other, because he's going to be talking about some things like buying land and tools and different strategies for getting ready to homestead, I'm actually going to jump out of this seat and my husband Nick is going to jump in. We're here to encourage and to help each other and be a supportive community as we go.
Hi, I'm Nick. I have a 3-acre piece of property up in the mountains, heavily wooded. I am here to build a home for my family, a place to grow animals and food and produce as much as we can in order to consume less of other stuff. So we've been here about 4 years, and we just recently moved into our house that we've built from trees on the property, and yes, some other stuff, but you know, mostly we've been able to scavenge and harvest the things we needed for the house. The other systems are definitely in process, and I think they'll be in process until we die. But that's what we're here to do, is to be just sort of constantly working on ourselves and ways to provide for ourselves.
Ancient Chinese proverb, right?
Is that it?
Man who finished house dies.
Oh, there you go.
Women too, I suppose. You know? Yeah, my name is Thomas, and I've owned a piece of property for 11 or 12 years. And I am probably, I would describe myself as someone who is interested in permaculturing that land. So I guess we'll talk a lot about that. And I would like to, the purpose of that is to have a place to go for the weekends or on vacations where I can be a little bit more connected to nature.
Okay, so from either one of you, if you're talking to somebody who has a dream of having a little piece of property and they want to be more self-sufficient and they want to have the opportunity to practice some of this stuff, what should they do first?
I'll go.
Go for it.
All right. So the first thing you need to do is you need to decide precisely what it is you want, and what kind of life you want, and how deep you would like to go into being self-sufficient. A lot of people find a larger piece of land around a house, let's say 1 acre, in a more suburban setting could, it fulfills their goal or their wishes. Other people want to go a little farther out and still be able to access, let's say, an urban area. Other people really would like to be like sort of on the cusp of true wilderness. So one of the things you have to decide is how much do you want to engage in, let's say, a city or a town. And then you also have to decide what kind of lifestyle you would like to lead. Because embedded in like 10 miles outside of town or 20 or 50 is how you're going to provide for yourself or your family. Because while it is, any of those scenarios are doable, they also do depend on money. And so you have to be judicious in your goals and then how you're going to achieve your goals. And along with that judiciousness is a kind of discipline.
Absolutely. I mean, I would agree. You sort of have to envision what you want before you set about getting it. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. But also to have some realistic goals along that spectrum of self-sufficiency, because it's a lot of stuff and a lot of education to get in place, And the claim that you would be 100% self-sufficient is entirely unattainable.
Yes, it's not true.
You can't. It's not actually doable.
No.
Because we are. I mean, we can create a lot of things.
Yes, we can.
But as human animals, we
are social creatures.
We're social creatures for one, but also we take a lot of energy in order to just keep ourselves going.
That's right.
So so having realistic goals, one of which is not 100% self-sufficiency.
Or as you take the journey towards 100% self-sufficiency, because it is a beautiful idea. Absolutely. You might find yourself realizing that it's not quite possible. There's steel right there. The saw that that Nick cut the timbers with from the trees on his property was manufactured in an industry.
Absolutely.
Because we have high manufacturing culture still.
Absolutely.
Thankfully.
And
otherwise it'd be pretty brutal, you know, and there's a pickup truck right outside this window.
Yep.
Right?
Which has made a lot of projects possible. And gasoline goes in any number of those things that we just talked about.
Yeah.
So
you can't really do anything without gasoline.
Right. I'm not blowing my own glass windows. I'm not.
No, you're not.
Right.
No,
so, but I think that the homesteading or self-sufficiency movement does well when the people in it have a focus towards efficiency and judicious use of resources.
Yes.
Rather than drawing hard lines of which resources are okay and which are not. But as long as you're being judicious and efficient, and that you've also cut your needs somewhat, you know. So,
and I think we're not making a hard point about 100% self-sufficiency. So please don't misunderstand this. But when you start thinking about being 100% self-sufficient, you go into it with any kind of depth, depending on your point of view and your worldview and your what you think about the world and your lifestyle, that will inform your choices and your goals much more. Meaning, there's a difference between someone sitting in their living room and watching television or and having Netflix and reading about something and dreaming about it and actually going out on a piece of land and doing it. So give yourself some slack.
Right, exactly.
Can you really do 100% self-sufficiency? Probably not, but you know, there are people who have done it before. They've moved to Alaska and they became like a Neanderthal style living. There was a guy who did that.
Sure.
Of course he committed suicide, I think.
Yeah.
He like fell on his knife because, well, it's, you know, living like a Neanderthal that's really hard for people who have never, who have like amenities. So, you know, you can, I suppose, maybe, but very few people would probably choose to do that. And the people who are watching this, you're probably not going to choose quite that depth of a goal. But shall we move on?
Probably.
To more beautiful things, because you can achieve nearly all the goals of self-sufficiency if you really desire it and you're willing to change your lifestyle and what you think about the world and your level of comfort. You don't have to change a lot of it.
Right.
But you can't run out to McDonald's.
No.
So
I can't. I mean, I've chosen the roughly 40-mile range from the nearest McDonald's, and so that doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't.
But I've also chosen, unlike our friend Thomas, to quit gainful employment for most of the year. So the McDonald's a day path is not for me anyway.
Doesn't fit.
Yeah. So, but you've kept a full-time job the entire time that you've had your property. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
And they're just different ways of going about it. And so, what's the advantage there?
Yeah. So for my goal, I had already bought a house before I decided to have a mortgage before I decided to try and get into a piece of property. And I also have a profession. I have a job. It's basically 9 to 5, and so my choice was to try and get into a piece of land as inexpensively as possible, and then slowly but surely, kind of like on the weekends, and be able to do work to build, like a cabin there. If you don't have money in the bank, so to speak, to take care of everything, then there are sort of like 2 other ways to do it. One, you can have a job and work it piecemeal over a longer time, or you save up money or need to get an inheritance and use that money towards moving forward in your goals. Either one works. From most of the things I've read and most of the things I've seen, it takes a little bit more money, or sometimes a lot more money than you think, and it takes more time because to build something you have to tool up, and that's very expensive, right? Because you have to buy tools, and then don't forget you have to learn. You have to be an autodidact. You have to teach yourself, or you have to pay for classes to have someone else teach you how to use them properly, and then you will. If you're like a normal person, like me, you'll make some mistakes and that'll cost you money.
Yeah.
Or you'll do things too soon.
True.
And then that stuff will go by the wayside. Like you'll plant your trees too soon because you don't have an irrigation system in, or you don't water them and then they die. Or you didn't put a fence around them so animals come and eat them. And we'll talk about that
right,
later.
yeah.
Now, my own specific piece of
Oh, you too.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
those are the kind of like the 3 possible ways. But to be very blunt about it, you need to have money.
It does.
Because we live in a modern world.
Absolutely. It does. It does take money.
That's right. And everything that you want to do at some point in time is going to stem from having the capital available to do that. Whether it's tooling up or pouring a foundation, even if you're doing it yourself, it also has to do with the amenities that you would like to have in your domicile, to whatever degree that might be. Because you do have to make a structure which will, in most places, even in Canada and America, you're going to have heat, so you need to have some kind of insulation. So all of the things that many things that we take for granted, living, a common, regular lifestyle, like let's see, in suburbia or in a city, you have to provide for yourself.
Absolutely. And so along the lines of providing for yourself, you can live very primitively. And so I'll back up and say we chose a different path, and we did what I term a jump shelter. So we had a yurt that we made. So within a very short amount of time, we were able to get on our property, get shelter set up, and be able to live there so that we could do the work of developing the land, and
Building infrastructure.
Exactly, building infrastructure. So, but living primitively, if you go that route, also takes a lot of your personal energy just for the day-to-day. So you can say, well, we just don't need this and this and this and this, but there is still a list of human needs. You still need water. You still need a place to poop. You still need a certain number of things. You need
Cordwood to heat during
yeah,
winter.
you need a heat source. You need a way to cook. So if you choose a pretty primitive route, know that that's going to be labor intensive.
Yes.
And that so much of your time and energy is going to go into the day-to-day that will really temper your ability to reach any of your homesteading goals,
Right,
of
because
actual development.
you only have a certain amount of energy that you can expend during the day. And so, like, let's say you have a wood cook stove. For you to use that wood cook stove, it must be stoked. It must be a certain temperature. And so you have to do that. You have to do that, even if it's summertime.
Yeah.
Same thing with hot water. And if you're not going to have like a solar hot water heater, then you need to have propane. and then you
Right.
have to also have a vehicle to take you to fill up your propane tanks, etc.
Right.
So there's all these, there's a web of connections that happen that it's easy to not see them when you're living down there.
Well, right, exactly. When they're all provided for you by the web of connections that society is
And all
has
you do
put
is pay
together.
money.
Right, and all
Yeah.
you do is just
For water
pay
and
money
heat.
in, and you get all the stuff out.
But by the way, let me interrupt you.
Yeah.
The jump shelter,
Mm-hmm.
very traditional thing to do in early Americana, as I know it, is that oftentimes people built a garage before they built their house, and they lived in their garage. In places like Scandinavia, they would build their sauna first. They would live in their sauna, correct pronunciation, I think, and then they would build
think you're right.
then they would build their house. So a lot of let's say early 20th century, depending on where you are, mid 20th century or 19th century strategies are really applicable to this kind of situation. Our ancestors had already done this.
Absolutely. Right.
So, it's a good thing to know.
Yeah.
Well, one of the principles of permaculture is to observe, because it's good not to start too soon. You don't want to start things too soon, because being on the land, watching the weather patterns, the patterns of sunlight, how the rain enters your land, water enters your land from rain, and how it leaves your land, snow
And
seasons.
through an annual cycle as
yeah,
well.
through an annual cycle.
Because one thing could look one way in the middle of summer.
It does look
and
more
then,
like summer.
Right, and then you could have a stream running through it in the spring.
That's right, because snow melt, you have all of a
Right.
sudden have an ephemeral stream, or you have an ephemeral spring which pops up.
Right.
Right, and so one of the most important things to do is observe the property that you're looking at, hopefully through several seasons. I realize that that might not be possible, but after you purchase your property, it is possible to see and to experience what's there. And I'll tell you about me. I have owned my land about a decade, and I now have a much deeper understanding of the energies, meaning sunlight, rain, winds, and even gravity, what these do throughout all 4 seasons. And my experience of that stuff, that experiential stuff, is better informs me of what I can do on that land. One of the things you should probably look for is a south-facing slope. Common
Yes.
thing. Right?
Absolutely.
South-facing slope. But our properties are a great contrast. I have a south-facing slope.
Yes, and I do not.
He doesn't, but he has water. And,
Right.
and
we do have water.
I don't have water from the ground.
Right.
And so these are the things you want to know and you want to study. You need to.
Absolutely, and
Come on.
Yes, we were ready to jump. We had our jump shelter. We chose property based on a pretty narrow, I guess limited scope of needs, and so we didn't consider absolutely everything.
How did I?
Right? How can you?
How can you?
But that's one of the things that we are now dealing with, and it seems pretty basic, and maybe it is, but we're not really able to generate electricity through solar. Right. On this property, it's not actually feasible to get all of our energy needs from solar,
Right.
even if we could afford it, which is another thing.
So I can't help you put solar panels atop that tree?
You absolutely can.
But you mean like full on, like 10 kilowatts? Or something.
Exactly. In order to
Right.
get enough power year round.
Yeah, okay.
And it really is a seasonal thing. On our north-facing slope, we have enough sun. I would say 8 months out of the year.
Mhm.
But there's a big chunk of the year where that's not true.
Right.
So had I the opportunity to observe this property for an entire year before buying it,
Yeah.
I would know that.
Yes.
That's a pretty rare opportunity, though, to be able to actually go and look at a property for a full year.
It is. That's
So, But the things that we were looking for, I think we're really still happy about. Heavily wooded, because we knew we wanted to build and have our own building material here on the property, and a water source, which is still rocking it. And there was a certain amount of development that had already been done here.
Which is good.
Absolutely. All of that, the dirt work the dirt work that was done here, there's paths kind of all over the property. There's a couple of building sites. There's a good garden site. So all of that dirt work was done before we got here. And if it hadn't been, we would take a long time to figure out exactly what the best way to do that was.
Mm-hmm.
But also it'd be a big expense to get all that dirt work done. And then the amount of time for the land to heal after that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it met enough of our search criteria that it was worth moving on.
Absolutely. And we can only make the best decision and the most informed decision we can with what information we have and our perspective at that time.
Absolutely.
So no harm, no foul.
No, absolutely.
Because hindsight's 20/20, and anybody can be a quarterback.
Yeah.
Right. Armchair quarterback.
Yes.
That's
exactly.
a joke.
So I'm wondering if you can talk to people about the pros and cons of moving to a completely new location or staying in a place that they're familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Because some people want to move, for example, to a state that has fewer restrictions regarding their chosen lifestyle.
Sure.
But then they might have to go completely away from everything.
Yeah.
Can you talk about pros and cons there, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
So one of the difficulties in moving to a completely new area is not knowing what the kind of culture in that area is like. So, if you were to say, have the idea, oh, I want to move to this state because it's a more rural state and because it's a much more wilderness and something like that, if you're of a certain political persuasion, the people there, or the majority of the people there, might be a different political persuasion. That's one thing that you have to consider. You also have to consider different pockets of areas in that state could have their own sort of subculture. Yeah, because families have been living on that dirt road for 3 generations, and when you move in, you really kind of are the outsider.
Absolutely.
And you can make friends with them if they're willing, but if they're not willing, you're not going to be able to make friends with them because you can't. No one's going to be. If they've chosen not to, you won't. No matter what you do.
And even if you do go ahead and go for it, I mean, as we did. I mean, I'm from not too far away from here, but we've moved and we've lived on both coasts of the U.S. I moved here with Massachusetts plates. And it was a tough. We had a tough time winning people over in the beginning. So
not to say you can't.
Not to say you can't, but just keep it in the back of your mind that not everybody in the area has exactly your goals, or even knows what your goals are.
Sure.
So you gotta tread lightly, I would say.
Yeah, be circumspect.
Yeah.
Well, we started this video with talking about the ways to begin homesteading, and one of the things we haven't covered is food. And this is of some kind of critical importance because usually people who want to homestead want to have control of their food sources or knowing just exactly what food they are eating. And so earlier we talked a little bit about shelter, and then this is kind of a basic way to think about it. We talked about fire or heating a little bit, or maybe you didn't.
Not a whole lot, but
not really.
Right. But say like in the yurt, for example, we have a tiny wood. We have a tiny little box stove, and that that got us through. It wasn't the most efficient way of heating, but that meant that we had to gather firewood. So that's the way we were talking about it.
Yeah, that's right. You were.
the work that it took to stay warm.
Mm-hmm. So, assuming you have your shelter together and you have your heat together, and you have water. So shelter, fire, water, and the last thing of the 4 basic necessities, sort of, is food. And there are a lot of things that one has to consider when you're trying to grow some food or a lot of your own food. And one of the things we want to start off with is things that eat your food. That you plan to eat, but they got to it first.
Right. Because like for us, if you're moving out into, it's not exactly wilderness, but if you're moving out into a semi-wild area, we have a lot of things around here that will get into your garden.
Yeah.
Or even into your garbage, or any number of tasty areas. We have had encounters with a black bear, but mostly when we're talking about losing food, elk is what has taken our food.
Yeah.
And just down the road from us, deer will get into your garden and destroy it.
Yeah. So you have to be aware when you plant things out, and whether they're things like nut trees or fruit trees or annuals or other types of perennial plants, that you have to be aware of the quadrupeds that are in your area, whether it's like whitetail, muley, deer, or elk. Because their whole lives are kind of taken up by sort of 2 things: procreation and eating.
Right.
I may be having fun a little bit, like prancing around. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah, the travel in between, I'm sure.
Travel in
is
between,
fun.
right? Yeah. So, and so that's what they're, that's what they do.
Right, and your garden plants and your fruit trees and everything
are really tasty.
Yeah, they're the best thing that they're going to find out there. So if you make it easy, they're going to come back too.
Yeah.
So
and they'll remember where it is.
Right, because like you said, their whole life sort of centers around that. They're really good at it.
Yeah, they are, especially when you're not there. So I'll tell you, I planted 2 nut trees just as an experiment, and I planted them in the spring. Not the best time to plant trees. Fall is really the best time to be planting trees like that. I think that's just my opinion. And within 2 weeks, they were all eaten up.
2 weeks.
Yeah, they didn't last, and they kill them. Right? They're usually eaten to death. So
Eaten down to the dirt, and then they're gone.
Yeah. Well, not quite that much, but it's. I have 2 kind of food predators on my land. One are the quadrupeds, elk who come through, and the other ones are hidden. They're rodentia. Yeah.
Right.
So, and I it's hard to tell. I'm not really sure whether they're voles or pocket gophers or moles, but that's probably the biggest problem for me.
They're a burrowing.
They're a burrowing animal, burrowing rodent, and they eat the roots of things that I've planted. So the elk ate the tops, and then these things came in and they ate all the roots off.
Nice.
And you can spend an awful lot of money replacing things that never even grow. So it would behoove you to look at your land and look to see just kind of what fauna. That's animals. We have flora, the plants, and then the fauna, which is sort of like everything else. Behoove you to look. And you can go to your county extension agent, or you can go to other people and find out just exactly what kind of animals are going to eat your things. Because it's one thing. It's pretty easy to combat elk. If you're going to plant a tree, you could put a ring of fence around it.
Sure.
That's easy. You get 3 T-posts, you can get a 6-foot fence, and you could grow a tree. And by the time it gets to be 8 feet tall, it's out of their browse area.
Right.
Or whatever. But like for me, the rodents, do I really want to dig a foot trench and put chicken wire in the ground? No. I'm toying with the idea of broken oyster shells and maybe broken pottery, that I can get from a potter, break it up into smaller pieces because they don't want to dig through it. I'm not sure. I haven't solved that problem yet.
Yeah.
So what kind of problems have you experienced besides elk on your property? Anything?
No, we've had raccoons, but they aren't getting after our plants, they're getting after our chickens.
Yes.
So we have learned the difference between chicken wire, which is
not good enough.
Not good for chickens, believe it or not, and hardware cloth, which a raccoon can't, for one, get through. Yeah. But say when we did lose a chicken to a raccoon, they were able to reach right through it and then pull that chicken clear through the chicken wire and tear a hole in it.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean that's kind of the only other nuisance animal that we've had get after things that were important to us. We do have squirrels and things, but they don't really cause a problem for us.
Right.
But we lost an entire year of potatoes because we didn't extend our fence and protect it from the elk.
Right.
So they ate it all right down before they were able to grow tubers in the ground. So people in our area recommend a 7-foot high, high tensile strength fence with streamers on it to keep the elk out.
Sure. Interesting about the raccoons, they're quite tenacious little creatures. They're part of the bear family. And yeah, they're clever. Same thing with fox or coyote. They'll go after your birds too.
Yeah.
And so living in the country or sort of on the cusp of the country, you'll have to think about these types of protections. And this is why a lot of people, or let's say Europeans when they first came here, this is why they kind of got rid of a lot of animals, because
Sure.
they couldn't eat. They couldn't feed their children had they not done that.
Well, right, and I would say that a better strategy, rather than say like if you're in the suburbs and you're gardening, you may be able to, set a bunch of traps and get all the gophers out of your yard. But if you're moving to a semi-wild area, I would go towards the protection end rather than the elimination end.
Yeah, I wasn't advocating elimination. I'm just talking about what people did do, and that's why we didn't really have. For a long time in many parts of let's say the United States, for a long time there weren't coyotes in LA, for instance, and now they are in LA. And there are bears now that have gone into suburban areas. Deer have infiltrated suburban areas. They live in little riparian fingers and things like that because they've adapted. And animals are really good at adapting. So are we. That's why we're still alive.
Right.
But yeah, I would do the defensive method also.
Yeah.
But you have to think about it, and you have to figure out what's there and figure out good strategies. I don't think elimination is probably a practical strategy because let's say you have 10 acres in Vermont forest woodland, right? And you have some kind of predator there that's predating your garden. Around your area is going to be, hundreds or thousands of acres of other forest woodland where all those animals can migrate to your space. And so elimination, probably not the best idea. Protection, probably the thing, but maybe not. If you are thinking about, raising a garden and homesteading, things like that.
Good for you.
Yeah, you should do that.
Do it.
Remember.
Do it.
This is life. You get to choose what kind of life you want to have. That's one of the beautiful things about living in this space and place and time. And by all means, you should be thinking about doing that and kind of inquire and learn and experience and plan it out and forge ahead. That's how human beings, that's what they've always done.
Yep.
And you can do that too.
Right. And so just educate yourself as best you can and keep your goals in mind and do it your way. That's what I would say.
And when there is a mistake being made, that's excellent because mistakes are the things that let us know that we're going in the wrong direction, and then you can redirect towards your goal. That's like what's supposed to happen.
That's learning.
Yeah, that's called learning, which is beautiful.
Yeah. All right.